Alright, in this tutorial I'm going to show you how you colorize old photographs using hue and saturation layers and their colorizing feature. And so we've seen it before where sometimes we can create artwork, or sometimes we may even been asked to colorize old photos. And one of the best ways to do that in Photoshop is through a masking layer that allows you to utilize hue and saturation. And just like your other masking layers, and if you're not familiar with masking layers, then I recommend watching my tutorial on layer masks. But what you got to do first is, just like in a layer mask, you got to kind of you got to isolate the area with a path or any of the selection tools available to you, the lasso or whatever you want to use. So we've got this area here selected for his glove, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right down here to this little kind of half black half white circle. I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to select the hue and saturation, and it's going to create a mask. That way I'm not painting over the pixels or anything like that. I'm retaining the pixels, and once you do that, you sometimes see it over here. I've torn it off, but you'll see the properties palette come up. And what we got to do first is right here we got to click colorize. So it's just going to give me just kind of a general color. Usually it's a sepia tone, regardless of what it is. I mean, I'll do another section to kind of show you guys, but it's always going to come up when you click colorize as a sepia tone. And with hue and saturation and lightness, I can change colors of things. Even if it wasn't black and white and he had a brown glove and I wanted to change it, I could change it to another color using hue saturation layers. So with hue, if I move the slider, you can see it starts changing the color based off the pixels that are on there. And so that's what I meant by a few seconds ago, saying that even if it's a color photograph, you can select an area of that color. Like if you wanted to change a rose from red to blue, you could do that through a hue saturation layer. So we want something that's more kind of a leathery sort of brown, so we're going to put it right around there. Saturation is how vibrant the color is going to be versus how gray it's going to be. So if I move my saturation layer down to here, it turns into gray, and that's just a general thing. Even if you want to change again in a color photograph, if you want to change something in the color photograph like that red rose to gray, you would create your hue saturation layer and mask out your area, and then you would move your saturation down to 0 and it desaturates it to gray. We don't want it that, so we're gonna move it up a little so that it kind of juices the color a little bit. Is the term juicing the color, so that it's got a little vibrancy to it. It looks kind of new, like a brown calfskin glove. And then of course lightness and darkness is the shadows and the highlights that are in there, and so I'm going to lower those a little so I can get some good contrast in my shadows, and not, because if I go the other way it's going to start blowing out the highlights too. It doesn't look real at that point. So right about there probably do us. And then that's my glove. So let's do, I don't know, his kerchief. And so again, I'm gonna select an area, masking it off, or rather select it with my path tool, pen tool, or whatever. And then I'm gonna go down here and select a hue saturation layer. And I'm going to click colorize, and again, colorize by general just gives you that kind of sepia tone look. Let's say if I want his neckerchief red, then I would just adjust it in the hue saturation, and that's like a dark kind of crimson there. That's what it looks like on the other end. It's pretty much the same. All right, and so I'm going to boost up the saturation to get it more of a red. And then I might lighten it a little bit. So The Colorize, like I said, gives you that kind of sepia look to it as colored pixels, just to kind of start things off with. But the hue, that's the neat thing about the hue saturation layer, is that you can change the colors of everything, and you don't damage, because it masks it out, you don't damage your initial pixels by painting right over them. And that's the hue saturation mask layers in Adobe Photoshop.